Welcome back to ICRS 2014 in Atlanta. We have Miss, where's your name? Kayla Fioravanti. How are you?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, great. Oh, I'm excited to have you here talking about 360 degrees of grief. Before we jump into this, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am an author. Most of my books have been business books.
Really?
Yes.
What kind of business books?
I used to be in the beauty industry, cosmetic and aromatherapy, and so I wrote about soap and aromatherapy and crafts. And then, you know.
Are these those massaging stones?
Oh, no.
I just had to ask.
Yeah, no, these are from my mother's beach, actually.
Wow.
My daughters and I built that and took a picture of it with my iPhone, and miraculously through technology, we were able to use that as a cover.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. So you wrote business books. For how long were you doing that?
I started in 2011 as I was getting ready to sell my business.
Wow.
And I sold my business and then have been a full-time wife, mother, and author since then.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, and now that you're writing this, tell us about your book.
Yes. Well, this is 64 authors and 102 stories. And it's all different perspectives of grief. People who have lost a loved one, who have lost, different kind of perspectives of that kind of grief. But then there's also things like divorce and unexpected pregnancy and all sorts of things that through life we are grieved with.
Mm. And what made you decide to put this kind of book together?
Well, my mother got sick and died within 3 weeks. And as I was sitting there at her bedside and watching everyone come through this, I kind of thought, well, everyone's having a different experience here with the grief than I am. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a book that we could have here as we sit here spending hours in hospice, where people could, read and reflect and spend quiet time together. Yeah. And so that's kind of where the original idea came from. It took about 2 years for me to really be ready to write the book, and I felt like my stories weren't enough of a perspective. It needed to be more people, other people's, if it was just my perspective, then I was missing other people who had lost.
So how did you gather all these stories?
I started asking around. I basically used social media. I put it on my blog. I put it on Facebook, and I said, I'm going to write this story. Who's interested? And people came from everywhere, and other people, referred people. So there are people I know in this, and there's people who know people who know people who know people.
And so on and so on and so on.
Right.
So
right.
Wow, that's a lot. What are some of the topics of grief that we cover here?
So there's in the death section, there's losing a twin.
Ooh,
there's losing siblings and children and other the things that people are used to. But then in the other section, there's drug abuse. There's pornography in a marriage. There's divorce. There's somebody grieving having had an abortion, someone talking about being 16 and getting pregnant, and how her parents were Jesus to her and coming alongside her and supporting her and really showing her what God's love really is like.
Mm. And so did it take a while to get all these stories edited, or did they edit them themselves and send them to you? Or
it was a variety of different things. I did have some came totally edited, ready to go. Some came, with a little bit of need of editing, and a few where people were like, they're really seasoned authors, but they were like, this is so raw, and I've never written about this, and I can't edit it. They were like, this is raw, and I'm just going to trust it with you. So there was all sorts of different things. We had people who were very experienced and others who weren't. So it was.
That's amazing. Now, has this been helping people grieve, and how's it helped you with your grieving?
Oh, it was incredibly healing for myself going through this. I couldn't have done it earlier than I did. When I started getting the stories, and I was like, I'm at a point in my life where I can handle this. But it was healing for the authors, the people who wrote in it, the editing team who worked on it. Mm-hmm. And then, now that it's out, we're getting, starting to get emails from people and how they're finding themselves, that they're healing from like grief within grief as they come through they picked it up because they lost their mother, but then they're finding a story about something from someone else's childhood that resonates with their childhood, and they're like, oh, I've got these kind of layers of grief that I need to deal with. So people are finding kind of unexpected gems in it, when they were looking for, something very specific, but that's not what.
Is there any stories that surprised you?
There were a lot of stories, that definitely surprised me. There's one from Dwayne Begoni, who was a medical examiner. And his is from the perspective of a stranger and being there for thousands of death notices and the things that impacted him, and even though, he experienced it just all the time, but then there were just certain ones like a little kid, things that would just really impact him more than another. And there was a story in here, because I was writing this from the perspective of my mother,
Okay.
and I had such a close relationship with her. And there's a story in here from one author, T.J. Barnes, who writes about being there for her mother when she's passing, but her mother didn't raise her. So she was raised by her aunt, and then it turned out that when her mother was dying, she was kind of the last living relative. So she comes there to be there for her mother, and she shows this incredible grace. And God, how God is so forgiving, and that's what she shows to her mother. And, her ultimate goal is that her mother would be saved and come to Christ, and she is in this process. And so it's just really neat to see those kind of stories.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So how long did it take you to put this together? Because I know you're waiting for a lot of people to get some info to you.
Well, I actually put this out in September. I said, I want to do this. Who wants to join me? I said, the deadline's in December, which was kind of a bad timing.
Yeah.
So we got to December. I had a lot of stories in December, but I had all these people who were like, I want to be part of it, but December.
There's too much activity in December.
Yeah, so I moved the deadline back to January, and when that deadline came, I was still getting stories, and I was like, okay, the book's huge. So we're going to have to cut it off, and that's why I'm going to have volume 2. So basically, September to January, I took submissions, and then we went through the editing process hard and heavy. We were done editing in March.
Wow, that's actually pretty quick.
And we released in April.
And then you got it. And with everybody that's writing, that's pretty good. And to edit and get it ready.
Yes,
that's nice.
I like to move along in a project.
So tell everybody what you want them to get out of this book. I know there's so many different stories. It's not like a book that you can read and go from page 1 to page 2. There's just a different story that's going to hit you.
Right.
But what do you, as the one that originated this and put this together, what do you want them to get?
I want them to know that they're not alone. No matter what kind of grief you're going through, you're not alone, and other people have gotten to the next day, the next minute, the next moment of their grief, and that they're normal. And grief is normal, and it's okay to go through, and there's no timeline. You don't have to go from, the death was today, and now by Saturday I should be at this point.
Yeah.
It isn't. It's a timeline. It can take years, and it's multiple stages, and it's okay.
Tell them how they can get your book.
You can get it at 360degreesbooks.com and KaylaFioravanti.com.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you being here.
Yes.
And we'll be back with another great guest.